Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am Jessica Del Mar. This is the Oneness Podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking all about September Ascension energy. There's a lot coming through for September, and so I want to break it down in this episode. The energy of September is one that instills a sense of trust and sensitivity. So trust and sensitivity were two things that came through in order to sort of describe the activation of September. It will benefit both those who are living more in their ego, as well as those who are fine-tuning what it means to cross dimensional frequencies. Now, ego is also a big thing coming through for September, and our ability to work within a lot of deeper ego shifts. So there was a second full moon of August on August 30th, and that was a blue supermoon. And basically, the energy of that blue supermoon shared with us knowledge of movement and breakthrough so that we can be in our most authentic self-knowledge going forward. So that August blue supermoon was a door. It opened a door into September to ignite a shift in ego and also illuminate an even deeper understanding of ourselves through this deeper ego shift. So this is why you might be feeling more open to yourselves in a lot of ways. You might be feeling like you're looking at yourself in more ways, in deeper ways, as if you're looking in a reflection or in a mirror. It's kind of not forcing you, but opening you up to seeing parts of yourself in deeper ways. But also, as you dive into these deeper parts of the self, there's a sort of struggle that you meet, a resistance that you meet in these deeper parts of yourself, which indicates an aspect of ego that stands in the way between you looking at yourself in these deeper parts of yourself. And so you have to be able to meet your ego in certain places, in many different places, and work through however the ego is standing in your way. So the ego essentially is also a closed door between you and the knowledge of deeper parts of you. And so working with that deeper layer of the ego is something that's going to come up a lot this month. So with that being said, let's talk about the ego and what the ego exactly is and what it means for us. The ego is something that evolves along with us. This is really important and something that I've spoken about before. The ego evolves with us. When I was doing quantum healing hypnosis and I was connecting with people's subconscious as well as ego, they were very intertwined. And when I was talking with the ego of a lot of people within this deeper hypnotic state, this quantum healing hypnosis state, the ego, the subconscious, and the higher self made it very clear in terms of how the ego is evolving with us and that the ego serves a very important role. It's not just something that we as human beings need to work to get rid of. It's something that we allow evolve with us, meaning we don't focus so much on dissolving the ego, but instead if we focus on our evolution, our transcendence of self, our ascension of self, essentially, then the ego will essentially follow us. It will move with us. It will evolve with us. And so it starts to become something much different, and it starts to serve us and become this sort of companion as it always is, but in a much deeper and different way. And so it's very exciting in terms of understanding how the ego shifts and also how it begins to blend back into the subconscious self. So ego essentially in a lower vibrational sense of self is a separation from the subconscious realm or layer of the mind self. And that's because we're in a very divisive and separating consciousness. As we move more into a unifying state of consciousness, the ego transcends by reuniting with that subconscious energetic layer of the mind to open the mind, to help open the mind in new different and more powerful ways. It's almost like we're able to use more of our mind when the ego starts to come back together in union with our subconscious layer of self. So essentially, again, there's not really a focus on the death of the ego because there really is no death of the ego. It simply transcends along with your perception and awareness of the self. What dies in an ego death is simply a shift in the perception of self. In other words, an old perception of self-service shifts or transcends into a new perception of self-sovereignty. And the vision that was shown to me in terms of this shift is that an old perception of self-service is kind of like the perception of being on the inside of your body looking out. And so there's an emphasis on the things that you're seeing externally. And the shift into a new perception of self-sovereignty is like you're looking in a mirror, but you're outside of your body looking at you. And so it's kind of like an outside looking in perspective, and there's more emphasis on the internal self, the observation of the inner self through this external awareness of the self. Many people believe that our ego is self-serving in only a negative way, and that's because we're perceiving the ego from this lower dimensional, lower vibrational, and separating consciousness. But our ego is also self-serving in positive ways too. When we're in survival mode, the ego serves to protect. That's sort of its main purpose. But in a nurtured, sacred mode, when we lift into a higher vibrational sacred mode, the ego serves to clarify. And so this is the difference between an ego separate from the subconscious layer and serving to protect versus in a lower vibration or a lower dimension, versus when we rise into a higher vibration and a higher dimension, the ego reunites with that subconscious layer to open up a new realm of clarification. It serves to clarify. Many people are looking for clarity in their lives right now, especially as old programs of the self dissolve more and more. So in many ways, when old programs of the self begin to dissolve, it resets the way that we look at ourselves, right? Through that shift of perspective. So we ask ourselves now, what does this mean for the self going forward in this shifting perspective? What is our purpose now that we're dissolving most of who we thought we were? Who am I in this new season of life? How do I show up in the world, right? So we're reevaluating who we are in many ways when we go through this shift of the ego and this shift of perspective. And in many ways, this is also kind of what people face when they're going through that ego death. So when they're going through that ego death, again, it's not necessarily a death of the ego, but rather it's a transcendence of the perspective of the ego. What many people don't realize is that the ego is not only in servitude to the self, but is also in sovereignty with spirit too, in order to serve self-sovereignty. So again, the purpose of ego when the body is in survival mode is internal protection and self-service. This is when it splits from the subconscious energy field to portray individual thoughts, feelings, and ideas about life, self, and protection. However, again, the purpose of ego when the body is in that sacred mode is about greater understanding and self-sovereignty. This is when it blends, it dissolves back into the subconscious energy field instead of separating from it for self-service. And so at this time, again, we're diving into so much of what our ego has protected us from and learning to be more vulnerable, more truthful, and more sensitive with ourselves so that our ego can calm or release its grip and open a new way of serving us. Ego transcendence is simply working within a level of subconscious beliefs and behaviors. And when our ego serves us, the channel in between conscious and unconscious, dark and light, is unveiled and taken apart for us to see, witness, and feel. So again, the ego works within the subconscious layer, whether it is separate from the subconscious or it is in union with the subconscious, it doesn't matter. But what the subconscious layer does, including the ego, is it acts as sort of a liaison between conscious and unconscious, dark and light, in order for us to understand all that is unconscious or dark and pull it into the conscious or the light. And so, as we're facing more parts of ourselves in this ego aspect, we are unveiling a lot of the knowledge and information that we hold in between conscious and unconscious, dark and light, in order to bring all of that into clarity and understanding within our now moment. A main focus of September is working within this very energy to reveal parts within our ego that holds us separate from our sacred sense of self. So the more unconscious or dark that we pull into the conscious and the light, the more that we open ourselves into higher frequencies, because we're able to hold more light and we are transcending and transmuting a lot of that denser, darker, unconscious energy. But not only that, but as we transcend into higher frequencies, we enter through our shift in perspective higher dimensions. And also, as we enter into higher dimensions, we are opening up our energy field to become more in union with our sacred sense of self versus our survival sense of self. So we're lifting out of survival and into sacred mode. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of your support. If you have a question that you want me to answer, feel free to email me your questions. I'll post my email address in the description of this episode. One-on-one sessions with me are available for this month of September. I'll post the link to my calendar in the description of this episode. We dive deep, so bring all of your questions. Thank you so much again for being here. I'll see you in the next episode. Oneness, love, and peace be with you.